My name is Keely Orgeman, and I am the Seymour H. Knox Jr. Associate Curator of Modern and Contemporary Arts at the Yale University Art Gallery, where we recently acquired Solitary Boat in Red and Blue by the late artist Fikre Gebreyesus. For me, this painting evokes the experience of being adrift in one's imagination, of wandering between thoughts. Of course, the sense of floating comes to mind due to the painting's subject matter, which is an empty boat at sea. No part of the composition seems static, from the flitting moths hovering above the vessel, to the fish darting below it, to the bright orange mark in the water suggesting a reflection from a sunrise or sunset. This utterly vital painting was the cover image of The Light of the World, a memoir about the life and loss of Gebreyesus, as told by his wife, the poet Elizabeth Alexander.
Solitary Boat in Red and Blue. It's a beautiful painting, but I think what struck me most about it, which I think is kind of ridiculous in a sense. I think when I first saw it, I made a kind of joke about I want a T-shirt with those stripes.
This I find utterly compelling, utterly seductive. Perhaps because I love the color blue, and who doesn't? But I find it, and this painting, so luminous, so doubled. I want to be in that boat, and perhaps I am.
It's playful, it's colorful, but there's also something really kind of majestic about it. I think it has to partially to do with the moths that are above. It seems like they're sort of leading the path ahead. I just find it really beautiful, and I think you get the feeling of lightness, of being a child almost, or seeing the world through childlike eyes.
It's really, I find it quite beautiful and in its sort of simplicity. I was recently on a lake, on a boat on a lake recently, and I had never been on a boat on a lake, I don't think. And we just were trudging along, and we were looking at all the houses that were on the lake, and we saw an eagle's nest in the tree, and it was just really just so peaceful and calming, and and yet nothing was happening. It just was. And that's how I feel about this. Nothing's happening, it just is. And I think that it's really important to sort of acknowledge the things that just are.
What I appreciate about it is that there's this moment, this event in the center of the painting, which is this kind of whimsical use of color. I don't know if that's necessarily what is intended by the painting, but that's sort of what I learn, or I feel like I'm giving license for in looking at it, that you could have a kind of eruption and play of color in the center where you wouldn't expect it.
It has such light in it, and is such an invitation to uncertainty and bounty. I think I wrote somewhere in my novel what we all long for. Even a wrecked and wretched boat has all the possibilities of moving. But this is not a wrecked boat. This is a boat moving with all haste, languor, and possibility. It is two boats, three boats in combination with one's imagined boat, solid, reflective, and imagined. Solitary is paradox here. Solitary is such a beautiful word. It can mean only or reclusive. It has both a hint of longing and not longing, sovereignty.
The first thing that struck me was the serenity of that painting. The birds visible in the distance, but only barely. The boat in red and blue, the water, the fish below, striking, serene scene, as though the painting were disappearing into itself. And then suddenly I thought of the Barca Nostra, which I saw with some friends at the Venice Biennale in 2019. Christopher Burchell, I think that's how you say his last name, had recovered that scene of mass death from the Mediterranean and put it on display without a title. Encountering that was starkly different than looking at that painting, which the boat looks quite similar to the migrant ship that sunk.
He's just, on his website, is described as a political refugee, which then makes it hard for me to sort of look at that boat and not think about, see that sort of referencing. There's like a tension between like the innocence of that boat. It feels sort of free, but also surrounded by the kind of like ominous background. So it's hard for me not to look at that image and think about like all the recent sort of tragedies of drownings and the failures of crossing, especially because if I remember correctly, the boat doesn't have oars, or it's just sort of sitting there.
But it also, in another way, looks like, because of its shape and its roundness, looks like a makeshift raft or an inner tube, right, floating on water. And immediately, of course, I thought of all of the immigration that we're seeing right now from Central America, from, especially El Salvador, where a part of that journey is through boat, right? Because it's the quickest way to cut through and get to Mexico and then start the journey on foot. We don't always conceive of beaches as borders, but they are. And thinking of course, all of the immigration from Cuba, right? What does that look like? And all of even the like Mare Nostrum laws, I think that's how you pronounce it, right? That Italy and France have, where if you see immigrants coming and they are struggling in the water, you have to leave them stranded in the water. And if you pick them up, you can get in trouble, right? For picking them up.
Finally, I think of the poet Asiya Wadood's book, Syncope, about the Left to Die boat, where all but 9 passengers on a solitary boat of 72 people perished, left to drift and die without help in the Mediterranean in March 2011. As she writes, most of us seek a just containment, some pillars, some structures, amid the freedom to guide us, and in the end, some ash scattered or a pine casket. Most of us seek a just containment. Who can blame us?